everyone, this is Brittany from Teach Me ABA, and I'm really excited to continue our series talking about the Task List 5 for those of you that are studying for the big exam. Now, if you've been watching the recent Section E videos, we've been talking about our professional and ethical compliance code for behavior analysts. And today's going to be no different. We're going to continue with E-4, and we're going to specifically talk about behavior analysts and their behavior change programs. So let's get into it. Behavior analysts are responsible for every aspect of a behavior change program, from the client learning objectives to staff performance. So as we've discussed, behavior analysts are responsible for gaining consent from a client on the onset of treatment. And they evaluate that consent on an ongoing basis. Because remember, our clients can always choose to leave us at any point in time. That's fine. Nobody's going to get in trouble for that. But let's talk about the responsibilities that a behavior analyst has during the implementation of that behavior change program. And first off, we're going to talk about conceptual consistency. So what that means is that we always have to design behavior change programs that are aligned with behavior analytic principles. Need a reminder? So go to our videos where we discuss Section A, and that one's titled Philosophical Underpinnings, because that's when you're really going to get that meat and that bones of the behavior analytic principles that we always have to attain to. So a treatment plan should not just be a bag of tricks, essentially. They should be based on our science of behavior. Up next is involving clients in the planning and especially consent. So to the extent that clients are able to get involved with the development and their planning of their treatment, it's really, really important because we need to ensure that these goals are what that client wants targeted, right? And not a client, then a loved one. We need to make sure that it aligns with what they want for their loved one or for themselves. So it's best that they are included throughout the entire progress of that treatment for that particular client. Now we need to talk about individualized behavior change programs. What does that mean? That basically means that behavior analysts should never, ever be copying and pasting behavior analytic programs from one client to another. Okay, so this is basically the equivalent of plagiarizing your work at school. So during the assessment period, we evaluate the client's unique skill sets, and therefore the results that we obtain from that should be used as a blueprint, if you will. This is going to give us an idea of what that specific individual really, really needs. If this is happening, that is a huge no-no. Our goals and our interventions should be based on the qualities unique to that individual, their values, their preferences, their motivations, the topographies, and the function of that behavior with their current skill deficits, let's say, and what they need improvement on. So now let's talk about approving behavior analytic change programs. What this means is that a behavior analyst must receive written consent before implementing and making modifications to a behavior change programs. So all of our work is always being watched, and that's a really good thing. This is important because you are more likely for having a client to buy in to your behavior change program if they accept what it is, if they understand a bit about what is going to be happening for themselves or for their loved one. So if a behavior analyst wants to make a change to a program, this needs to be reviewed with the stakeholder prior to implementing that change. And we even need to state the reason for why we want to recommend this change to even begin with. Because again, our clients need to make informed decisions about their treatment because again, it's all about them anyway. So that leads us into describing behavior change objectives. This is objectives or goals or behavior change programs that should be in the form of, again, a written description, and this needs to be presented to a client before implementing it. Furthermore, we need to basically have a risk to benefit analysis that needs to be conducted for that particular procedure, for any procedure really. And the reason we do this is because it essentially ensures that we are going to improve a client's life. More so, we're also taking into account the risk that might be involved with that particular procedure. Mind you, I'm not saying that we're going immediately into like a punishment procedure because again, behavior analysts always start off with positive reinforcement. But even with positive reinforcement, there are some risks. So that's definitely something that you need to talk about. A behavior may get better, it may get worse, but this should carefully be explained to the stakeholders, and alternative options should always be presented, as well as the risks and benefits to those alternative options. So, how exactly do you talk about these risks? Well, the next section is actually talking about describing conditions for behavior change success. So behavior analysts must describe the conditions that they need to provide the most effective behavior change program to their loved ones or for themselves. So for instance, programs are likely to be more successful if parents are actively involved in the treatment and implement the treatment plan both inside the home and outside of treatment sessions. If all of this is described and there's a buy-in from everybody that that's what they're going to do, it's only going to benefit your client even more. Up next is environmental conditions that interfere with the implementation of a behavior change program. What this means is that should there be an environment such as a family home, a group home, right, a school setting that is not appropriate for behavior change programs, then a behavior analyst should work with the family to develop and discuss an environment that is appropriate. So for instance, if treatment sessions are occurring in a room where family members are often watching television, this could really interfere with the motivation and the attention of lessons when they're being implemented by a therapist. So if these types of obstacles interfere with the efficacy of treatment, then behavior analysts need to indicate and they need to make it known that this is something that is interfering with our work, and we need to come up with a game plan to correct it. So now we have to talk about the considerations of using a punishment procedure with a behavior analytic program. By that I mean is that during the creation and implementation of a behavior change program, the behavior analyst needs to always, of course, recommend reinforcement first, right? Punishment needs to be the very last thing that we are considering. And even then, there's a lot of aspects that need to go into a punishment procedure. All steps need to be taken to ensure that reinforcement procedures have been utilized, unless the target behavior has been really dangerous. So what I mean by that is that, let's say that there's a client that's eloping into the street. Well, caution sign, that's really scary because we want to make sure that our clients are safe. So if something like that is happening, then you do need to consider punishment procedures, and you really want to make sure that you are doing it in a very specific way. And we can get into that in upcoming videos as well. Along with implementing a punishment procedure, you always want to make sure that you have a punishment procedure and then you also have a reinforcement procedure. It needs to be accompanied. Both of them need to happen, or else there's going to be a lot of other behavioral issues that will happen. Which again, it needs to be evaluated, it needs to be shown that it is effective, and there also needs to be provided an exit plan for that. Because remember, you don't necessarily want to keep that for long periods. That's not going to help anybody. Punishment procedures are also, they have side effects, so that's the other thing that needs to be considered along with that. So we can condition people, events, and surrounding punishments as aversive situations that clients just don't want to be a part of. So essentially this can cause generalized avoidance behaviors that is going to interfere with a client's ability to function throughout all aspects of their life. So definitely big things to consider there when you're talking about punishment procedure. And as always, you really need to make sure that someone else is there to help you, whether it be your supervisor or your BCBA. Make sure that someone is always there right beside you to help you along with this process. So let's talk about least restrictive procedures. Behavior analysts must review and ensure that the most least restrictive procedures are being used. This means that our procedures allow the client to have a lot of freedom and as much independence as possible. When possible, the behavior analyst should really work to integrate other individuals within that community setting. We should be using minimal prompting when necessary, and we also need to focus on reinforcement more so than punishment procedures, as we've been discussing in this video. Okay, you should also avoid using harmful reinforcers. I know that sounds kind of interesting out loud, but just bear with me. Let me talk about it with you a little bit. Behavior analysts should always consider potential reinforcers that can be harmful to the health and the well-being of your client. For example, while edibles are very effective for most clients, we need to consider not using that kind of reinforcer for prolonged periods of time. You obviously don't want your client to have cavities or in the long run possibly get diabetes from it. So especially edibles that can cause all of these health implications, you really want to pay attention to those, and you really want to fade them out as much as possible if you need to use them. We should also avoid toxic reinforcers such as drugs or cigarettes as well. Last but not least, we need to talk about discontinuing behavior change programs and behavior analytics services. Prior to the discontinuation of behavior analytic programs, the behavior analyst must outline the discharge criteria and discuss it with a client. And again, this should occur at the onset of treatment. If these criteria are not met, then the behavior analyst should work to remedy the issue with reasonable extent and work to facilitate an ease of transition if you need to transition from one provider to another. This does not mean that you need to find another provider for your client, or you have to wait until another provider is available to accept them if they're not able to follow through with certain guidelines, but a reasonable attempt should be made always. Another form in which the discontinuation can be carried out is when the established criteria of goals for that client has been met, and then behavior analytic services are no longer needed. I said this once in another video, but we essentially want to work ourselves out of a job. We need to make ourselves as invisible as time goes on. It's really unfortunate because I personally love and enjoy my time with each of my clients, so it does get a little bit sad when they go, but guess what? That means that you did your job correctly. So I really hope that this has been informative and I've been able to give you a lot of information. For those of you that have already sent us some comments saying that you have found this series that we're doing very beneficial for your exam studying, I want to say thank you so much. We really appreciate those comments. And for anyone who's new here, please like, subscribe, and share. And we will see you next Wednesday, 10 a.m.
Do